Well, hi everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee and meteorologist Joe Rayo right here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show on Wednesday, November the 4th, the day after Election Day, which I think most of us thought would never get here. And the Joe and Joe Weather Show is proudly brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware in West Babylon, 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, 631 756 1125. They have the best prices in town on rock salt, any kind of snow melt or ice melting pellets. And also, you have all the winter weather equipment you need to get you through winter storms this season. Omni True Value Hardware is right there for you. 631 756 1125, or just go to the website, omnitruevalue.com. And Mr. Rayo, welcome aboard. We have been informed by the chairman that today is Joe and Joe Appreciation Day. And that's really very nice. We're actually quite humbled by it. Thank you. Joe and I, of course, both appreciate it. We appreciate it so much that Joe did his hair tonight in honor of this.
I did.
You did.
I did.
Do you have a pulse?
Well,
Are you still with us?
uh, yeah, I guess I am.
Okay, so why? Did you get any sleep last night?
Not much.
Well, you were up all night?
I went to bed after the president made his speech at 3 a.m.
Oh, I went to
and
bed
then I
long
couldn't
before
sleep
that.
much. I got up at 6:30 this morning because I couldn't get much sleep after that, and I've been pretty much up since then. Ex-
You have that?
except I was sound asleep up until about 3 minutes ago. So
Oh, really? Oh, great
I was
pep.
on. I fell asleep watching Nora O'Donnell, but it doesn't matter because she always puts me to sleep.
Good Lord. Well,
So
we are enjoying some pretty nice weather. I'm noticing, by the way, at least on my end, I'm going to figure that the folks at home, I'm broadcasting from a different place today. The internet
that's right.
signal, what's that?
You're on the same. We're both on the same side of the river tonight.
That's right. I'm one county down from you,
Yes.
but apparently faulty internet signals seem to follow me wherever I go. But
Oh
okay,
dear.
whatever was going on just seems to have stayed. Well, there it is. It's unstabilized, but no matter. Beautiful day today, and beautiful weather as far as the eye can see. I think at least through the weekend and into the start of next week. Anyhow.
My wife and I, we spent the afternoon taking down her tomato plants. Finally, that's pretty good. I mean, they last until the fourth day of November.
Yeah, that's not too shabby. Did you get any green tomatoes?
Oh, we have so many. We had to get rid of so many. You know, these are cherry tomatoes, and I
Do
don't
you?
know how many dozens of cherry tomatoes no longer could be used because, unfortunately, even though I had a big argument with her, I said, "Well, why don't you just leave them out? It's going to be nice and mild the next few days." But they were out during the cold weather we had at the end of last week and over the weekend. Oh, they can't be. You can't do anything with them anymore. So
All right. Oh well. There's always next year.
yes.
All right, let's get through. Let's go through some of the weather that's going on. There's really just there are three things happening. One is Tropical Storm Ada, which is moving through Central America. There is storminess that's going to be moving into the Pacific Northwest and Northern Rockies. And then there's mostly nice weather for everybody else, and that includes us here. I really don't see anything that is going to cause any serious issues right through the weekend. Maybe as we get toward the end of the week and on the weekend, nighttime and morning hours along the coast, it might see a little bit of low cloudiness and fog that could develop. But I'm thinking that the marine layer here, Joe, is going to be awfully thin. And once we get past sunrise by a short time, whatever collects at the coast will probably burn off relatively quickly.
Joe, I'm reminded about, periods when we've had this kind of weather before in November. One that particularly stands out is 1975 in early November. In fact, if you check the record books, you can find that we set several records at Central Park in that particular year. I looked at the maps and made comparisons to what we're seeing now and in the days ahead, and they don't look all that too much different. So I still maintain that even though the models are holding temperatures, let's say in New York City, to around 70, it would not be at all surprising if we had, let's say, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, one or two or all 3 days going into the 70 to 75 degree range, something ridiculous like that. It is just so wonderful that we have a stretch of weather like this.
Yeah.
I know I can't think of better weather for me to get rid of all those leaves that that has fallen over the last week on both my front and back lawns. But still, nonetheless, it's gonna be nice to be outside for these next several days.
Very quiet, pleasant mid-fall weather, just about all everywhere in the east. The only exception is in Florida, getting a little bit of an easterly flow there north of the moisture that is uh, part of that whole envelope that uh, tropical storm Eta is in, which is far enough south where it's actually off the view of this particular satellite loop. But there are some showers that are coming in from off the ocean there. My buddy Phil is down in Fort Pierce, and he ran into a few of those today. But other than that area of clouds that you see moving right through the middle part of the U.S., the middle Mississippi Valley, and you see the stuff that's up in the Northwest, there really is just very little going on. And in fact, take a look at the Canadian satellite loop. Now, I'm going to just give this a refresh because the last frame on this was from this morning. So I'll update this a bit, and you'll notice that there's a big low spinning in the Gulf of Alaska on the upper left, and that's throwing moisture into the Pacific Northwest in waves, and it moves inland into the northern Rockies. But all the flow across Canada, Joe, is blowing west to east, and without any kind of uh, the short waves are not dropping southward into the United States, into the Great Lakes, into the Ohio Valley. They're just basically moving along from west to east across Canada, which means that our air is pretty much coming from California, Oregon, Nevada, and just moving in an almost straight west to east flow. That's a warmish, and as long as the wind stays primarily southwest or west, it's also going to be bone dry. I mean, it'll be bone dry. We won't get any rain, but as long as that direction holds, we won't be seeing the dew points come up. And that's, we had some days where the sun came out back a couple of weeks ago in that very long semi-cloudy stretch that we were in on some days where the sun broke out, but it was really sticky in the low levels of the atmosphere. I don't think you're going to see that this time around. This is going to be, I think, a lot more pleasant from that standpoint.
And you may remember it was just over a year ago. It was Halloween 2019, and we had a day and evening where temperatures were into the 70s, but the dew point temperatures were also into the 70s. We even had, if I recall correctly, thunderstorm and even tornado watch areas in and around our vicinity. It was very unfall like, and yeah, it's nice now to look forward to the next several days. 60s to maybe even at or above 70 in spots, and have dew point temperatures that are going to be so low, like in the 40s. It's going to be wonderful. I'm glad we're sitting pretty here. I hope we're not going to have to pay for this sometime down the road, but of course, we will.
Well, here in the Northeast, especially, getting stretches of more than 3 or 4 days without some rain is that's kind of unusual, but they do happen, and then of course we make up for that sometimes with those stretches that go for a week where we don't see the sun, and we just went through almost 2 weeks of that. So thankfully, again, that's not in the cards. Check out the radar in the across the U.S. There ain't nothing going on. I mean, it's just it's quiet from coast to coast. The only exception, again, up in northwestern Washington State to see some rain showers coming in from off the Pacific Ocean, and that's where our storminess is going to wind up being in the coming days. But uh, my lord, let me see. I can't even see. Actually, there were a few freckles of showers along the Florida coast. Very few, but there's just a couple of freckles, and that's just about it. This is as quiet a radar as I've seen in a long time.
Yes, from coast to coast. And in fact, I looking at the WPC probability of precipitation maps a few days ago. I was marveling about the fact that aside from maybe one or two spots in South Florida or the extreme Pacific Northwest, practically the entire country, all you saw were zeros, zero, 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 zero. And I said, boy, you talk about a coast to coast lack of any precip. That's it. And indeed, we're seeing it now. Again, the may I use the $5 word, a paucity of precipitation today.
Yeah, that's a $5 word,
Yes.
and non-taxable, by the way, too. We are looking at WPC's 7-day rainfall map. I would just point out that what you see in the Northeast and down in the Mid-Atlantic states and in the Appalachians, that is really more for the latter part of this forecast period, which goes right through 7 p.m. next Wednesday. And we do start to finally, but up until then, they'll at least I think through Tuesday, we will have no precip to worry about. But we start to get into the edge here of a quarter to a half an inch of liquid, and you go back into Pennsylvania, West Virginia, down into the Central Appalachians. You have pockets of an inch and a half, and heavier precip back up through parts of northern Michigan, throughout Wisconsin, Iowa, and northern Illinois. A bit of a break, and then also robust precip up and down the Rockies, and also up and down most of the West Coast. I mean, I know the wildfire situation out west has calmed down considerably, if not disappeared altogether in some places, which is great news. But now at least they're getting some rains, and that is a good thing.
It is. And boy, I tell you, you look back over this late summer and fall season of what those people out west had to put up with and had to go through. They certainly can use a break now. I mean, it's nice now that all the moisture, all the rain and shower activity has finally arrived there. Unfortunately, sadly, a bit too late for literally tens of thousands of acres of parkland, and we can only hope that the next summer and fall will be a little bit different, or at least a little bit better than what they had to put up with this particular year.
All right, so let's run through what the latest models are doing. I'll bring up the latest run of the GFS model, and we'll just give it a moment to load here. So let's run through a couple of issues. First off, maybe the best thing to do is to start. We'll start with the upper air just to give everybody an idea of what's happening here. And here we are at Wednesday night, and as we described on the satellite, you've got this west to east flow. My web paint extension on my Google Chrome isn't working for some reason. Haven't had a chance to go back and check it, so hopefully it will. I can get it back to work again. But you are seeing this west to east flow across the U.S., but it's a warm flow. You don't have any blue in this map, folks. It's all that brownish color, reddish brown across all of the U.S., and that's telling us that the height lines that you see on the map that go from west to east, they are relative to normal. They are actually higher than normal, so it's indicative of showing us warmer air. And if you see where the darker red colors are, indicating that that's probably where your greatest anomalies are going to be as far as relative to normal at the surface, even though we are looking at 18,000 feet. And what stands out here, if you look for tomorrow morning, the whole country, the entire nation, and a good chunk of southern Canada is in this regime, in this scheme. And then as we go forward, we start to see the models get some amplitude. So by that I mean that you see a deep trough in the western part of the United States, actually a very deep trough and upper low that drop down to California. And to support that, a corresponding big upper high builds in the eastern part of the United States for the weekend. And this is where, Joe, you have you're talking about where temperatures are probably going to outperform guidance and get up into maybe the low or middle 70s here and down to and elsewhere in the northeast and northern mid-Atlantic states. I think you certainly can be. You can. It's the models are supportive of that idea. Again, as long as we have a wind that's more west than anything else, I think you stand a very good chance of hitting your outperformance in terms of high temperatures.
I mean, my goodness, Joe, look at the shades of deep red or deep orange that are literally intensifying over the Great Lakes and into Quebec, Canada. It's like that ridge of high pressure is attached to an air compressor and it's just inflating like a big balloon across the northeast and southeastern Canada. And as I mentioned yesterday, this kind of reminds me of that pattern that we saw back at the beginning of the spring when we saw you talk about outperforming. You remember we had places like northern Maine and Montreal hitting the mid and upper 90s. We were stuck, meanwhile, in the 70s and low 80s here, and the exceedingly warm or hot temperatures were off inland to the north of us. And interesting, I haven't looked or paid much attention to what the temperatures are expected to be up north of here and north and east of here, but I'll bet you that they're going to have record temperatures, across portions of New England. A lot of the leaf watchers are probably saying, "Boy, it's too bad we couldn't have this, 2, 3 weeks ago when everything was in full bloom and the colors were out and it's spectacular." Of course, now you head on up into the Adirondacks or the green or white mountains of New Hampshire and Vermont, all you're going to find is a lot of bare limbs, tree limbs, but still very, very unusually mild across our quadrant of the United States for this time of the year.
I got my web paint working again. I figured out what was wrong. So you can
Oh,
see
well, that's
you can
good.
you can see, folks, the jet how far south it dips into the western part of the United States, and there's this upper low. I'm looking at Sunday morning. We already had one upper low drop down into Southern California. That actually rotates, weakens, opens up, and rotates around up into Utah and Colorado, and a second upper low that comes in. And of course, while all that is happening, here's your upper high sitting over Virginia. Again, this really minimizes any kind of marine threat. And of course, we're going to be paying attention to this area down in the tropics, in the subtropics, in the Gulf of Mexico down to Cuba, because we're going to have tropical storm Eta emerging into the Caribbean, and there is a weak trough here from Louisiana, right there, from Louisiana down into the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. And that trough is going to be responsible for opening up an alleyway for Tropical Storm Eta to move northeast and northward out of the Caribbean across Cuba. And then maybe, and I think the risk is growing, that we're going to see tropical storm conditions late in the weekend, early next week in South Florida. But we'll come back to that. In the meantime, going into next week, until we get this ridge to break down and the trough in the west to start opening up and coming eastward, our weather's going to be okay. Now you start to see that happen. The upper air opens up first, and then the surface weather will catch up in time. So the ridge breaks down, and the trough in the west is shooting a little bit of energy to the east, but there's still some semblance of ridging here in the eastern part of the United States. The flow's more west-southwest, and I'm thinking we're probably going to have to deal with some cold front later next week. And Joe, while that's all happening, and you start to see a bit more of an active flow, you also see what happens on this run of the GFS. What represents Eta winds up kind of getting left behind down in the area of South Florida down into the Florida Straits. And this is
Now,
late.
this is the
This is next
18Z run,
Saturday we're
correct?
talking about.
This is the 18Z run, right? The
Correct.
intermediate run. Okay, all
And,
right.
and we said yesterday that there was a distinct possibility, and I think there still is a possibility that you can wind up seeing this thing, meander in some fashion. And I don't see any reason to. I don't see anything that lends support to the idea that this is going to come up the East Coast. And at the same time, I don't see. It's just a very complex, somewhat convoluted upper air. that we're dealing with the steering. And Ada does something really weird, Joe. In fact, let me give me the Atlantic view, because if this verifies, this would be sort of strange. So I'll roll it back. So here's Ada in Central America. The large gyre is still there. The low-level center, actually, if you believe the GFS, the low-level center actually winds up moving into the Pacific tomorrow morning, and then a new center forms in all that convection that remains in the Northwest Caribbean, and this winds up organizing, goes over eastern Cuba, okay, with heavy rains, turns into the Bahamas. Then by the time and that actually delays the arrival of anything into South Florida, although they do get into some rain Sunday into Monday. And then it goes through the Florida Straits to about Key West on this run, then goes southward and goes over eastern Cuba, back into the Northwest Caribbean, at which point this model has it down to a 947 pressure, okay? Back in that channel, it's moving west-southwest toward the northern part of the Yucatan Peninsula into the Southwest Gulf. I mean, this is, when you're dealing with a situation like this where there's no flow and you don't have a deep trough coming all the way down to create an alleyway for it to move up the East Coast, listen, I wouldn't be shocked if it winds up doing some weird stuff here.
There's also that possibility if the front next week manages to have a vigorous southerly flow ahead of it, that maybe some of the moisture might be drawn up the coast. But that's you take a look at what the 18Z is cooking up now with this thing. You say so. What possibly could happen? You really don't know.
No, you don't. You have the upper high to the north. Okay, so it really can't go northeast. You have this trough, this weak trough that goes from Louisiana down into the southeast Gulf. So it's kind of responding a little bit to both of them in trying to go northeast. And let me just clean this up a little bit. In trying to go northeast and north and then northwest. But then you have this the trough that's in the Gulf of Mexico weakens, and the upper flow, that south-southwest flow, you have to go almost into northern Louisiana to find it, and it really doesn't make a whole lot of progress further east. Eventually, kind of the edge of it gets into the southeast part of the United States, but it just never seems to get far enough south to grab it, and then it gets left behind, and you start to get higher pressures building again to the north of it, so it gets suppressed south. It's one of many combinations of things that could wind up happening out of this. So I hate to punt every day, but sometimes all you can do when you're forecasting in a situation like this, all you can do is punt the football and wait for a little more clarity.
Almost looks like the storm is drunk.
Well, this time of year, in some respects, you get a decisive flow across the United States, but you also get these situations in the latter part of the hurricane season sometimes in the deep tropics where the troughs don't get far enough south. The flow just dies because you really lose the trade flow push. So what are you left with? You're left with whatever minor systems are there in the upper atmosphere to move it along. And by the way, in terms of precip here, just to show you what the outcome is with what comes out of the west, looks like a fairly sizable snowfall for the northern Rockies and up into much of Montana for Sunday. And some showers start to move eastward by Monday night. They're in the upper Mississippi Valley, but they take another 2 days to get anywhere close to the East Coast. So it looks like maybe we start to saturate things a little bit later Tuesday with clouds and more of a south or a south-southeast flow, and get into some showers with the cold front along about Wednesday of next week. But Joe, the tropical system's at the bottom of this frontal boundary. It just gets completely, the front keeps going east, and the tropical system starts to turn southward.
But we have the last three GFS runs have given us three different types of solutions
Yes.
for this tropical system. The 6Z earlier this morning had the storm coming up and kind of getting scrambled, so to speak. There's really no entity, so to speak, of where the storm is once we get on into, let's say, the fourth or fifth of, excuse me. Um, I'm trying here to now my system is not working the way I want it to work. Um, but it was more diffuse. Then we had the 12Z run, the primary run, which pretty much brought the system up to Florida, and then kind of latched onto that front and kind of got squeezed, if you will, rapidly north and eastward
Right,
along parallel to
right.
the coast. And now what you just pointed out here for 18Z is, whoops, we missed the front, and it's kind of like, as I said, it's kind of like drunk. It's like wobbling around into the Gulf of Mexico, and you really don't know where it's going to go. So I mean, like,
Well,
why? There's no need to fret here because
no.
we just, a week from now, it's going to be doing something. We just don't know because the models just can't seem to hang their hat on
Now,
one specific solution here.
you look at the European. The European actually has a bit more of has something that has more continuity and makes it maybe a little more sense in that once it goes through the Florida Straits, the trough in the west is deeper and it's actually pushed a little bit further to the east, and you have a weaker high that's up to the northeast of the storm that starts to drop down to the Bahamas. So it forces the tropical system is actually moving around the periphery of that high and then towards what looks like a stronger south-southwest flow on the European. So, of course, it doesn't go out far enough, but it actually, at on day 8 and 9, it looks like it's heading for where else? New Orleans, until it sort of makes a sharp right-hand turn into the Florida Panhandle and goes northeast from there, gets involved with the weather front that's approaching, and sort of merges with it. So that to me kind of makes a little bit more sense because it sort of follows with the natural flow of things. But and there's no guarantee that the Europeans right either. You and I both have said quite a few times recently how the GFS has outperformed in a rather sizable way with regards to tropical systems, and if it's doing something that looks like a weird uh, no flow situation where it's going to meander around for a while, you have to respect the model because of its performance. That hey, maybe it is pointing to something. On the other hand, it's only another solution that will change in the next run. So we
What
just, as I said, you just punt, and we
what was this
punted.
tropical system? What was the tropical system? I know it was like 20 or 25 tropical cyclones
25
ago.
storms ago. You're
Uh,
asking the wrong person that question.
we had, I mean, we also had a gyre, and we also had extremely low pressure across the Gulf Coast for a long time before something finally emerged out of that. I'd seen this pattern before. It must have happened, let's say, either in the late spring or early summer. We've had so many of these things so far this season. I just simply don't remember. I guess we could go back and look at the list of names, but this is an intriguing situation coming up. I want to on the chat board, Reaver 501. He says I never answered the question of the foos. I have a formula to get wind speeds. The foos, the NAM foos. I've always used the boundary level winds, and if you take the boundary level wind speed and multiply it by 1.5, that pretty well will give you close to what is expected in terms of wind gusts. So
By the
let's
way,
say,
you can't. I put it up on the screen. I'm going to make it a little bigger so we can kind of show people what we're talking about when we say what the foos. This is what the foos looks like. It's a bunch of numbers. It's basically
right.
code, and if you know how to decode it, you can figure a lot out about the atmosphere.
I have a friend who knows the Morse code, and he's able to, you know, at 35 or 40 words a minute, he's able to, carry on conversations with people. I always wanted to be a ham radio operator and learn the Morse code, could never master it. And yet, my friend, when he sees me looking at numbers like this, he said, "How can you make out anything out of this? It looks like a jumble of numbers." So
Right.
you see different strokes for different folks. But yeah,
Exactly.
if you look under the column that says there are four columns, and column number 3 is PSDDFF. PS stands for surface pressure.
Right at the top,
DD,
folks.
right, and DD is direction, and FF is the speed. FF, that's the boundary level wind. That's not the wind speed that you have here at the surface. It's what you're looking at. Let's say maybe about a couple of thousand feet above your head. But I've always found that if you take the speed of the wind and multiply it by 1.5, you can pretty well get close to what the maximum wind speed will be, wind gust speed will be. So 24 hours. This is uh, this is the 18Z run. So at 18Z tomorrow, which is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. My goodness, we're back on standard time. Thank goodness for that. The boundary level wind is 2010. So the winds will be coming from a south southwest direction. 10, you multiply that by 1.5, that's 15. So you might expect to see early tomorrow afternoon, at least at LaGuardia, winds gusting up to about 15 miles an hour. It's no big deal when there's not much wind going on. There won't be much wind going on tomorrow. But in those situations where you have a potential wind advisory or high wind warning or something like that, I always take a look at the foose just to see what they're churning up. I'll tell you what, though, one day uh, this was back a few years ago, looking at the foose, and they had a boundary level wind of like 55, and I
Oh,
said, 55. I said that's just winds gusting up like 80 miles an hour. It never does get up that high, but it does give you an idea that's going to be a little bit on the breezy side when you see
and,
stuff like that.
and this foos, by the way, just so you know, folks, it comes out on each link that you would get. This is from the weather department up in Albany, upstate New York, atmos.albany.edu, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff on there. But if you
It
Google
used to be
from
a lot. It used to be a lot easier when you and I, Joe, when we actually we were reared on the LFM foos,
hmm
which eventually became the NGM foos,
hmm
which then became the NAM foos.
became
Or
the
no, it
Ada
used to be the
foos.
EPA,
You
the
forgot
EPA
the
foos,
you forgot the Ada foos,
the ADA
which
foos,
that the
and now we have the
Ada's now assumed the identity of a category 4 hurricane.
right, and now
So
now
now
we
we
have the
have
NAM, now we have the NAM foos.
the NAMFOOS,
And it was a lot easier back in those days. Each station was separated. I mean, you could actually, here was LaGuardia, here's Philadelphia, Boston, and now for whatever reason, they've now taken all of these numbers and jammed them all together. So you
Well,
really
what
have to
I
have a good,
used to like, and I don't know, I think they stopped maintaining it, but I used to go to the Texas A&M website where you could put in a station and then it would give you an interpolated foos for, say, if I wanted to see what it looked like for islip, which doesn't
yeah,
have a foos for it. The stations, Albany, Burlington, LaGuardia, Boston, Williamsport, and we're talking just a handful of stations, and then you go down in the Mid Atlantic and you get Washington, DCA, Washington D.C., Norfolk, Virginia, ORF, and some others. But if you wanted to find out something about one of the spots in between, you could do the Texas A&M site. It was great because you could just put the station in, and it would give you an interpolated foos, not just for the NAM, but also for the you could do it for the GFS too, which was really useful because you used to be able to pull out for a long time. You couldn't get uh, precip totals off the GFS. You had to sort of guess. Well, you could put in a station in this thing, and it would give you, it would
right.
give you 6 hour or even 3 hour liquid amounts, which was wonderful. But like I said, it doesn't work any. I don't think that site's working anymore. And by the way, the NAM foos should not be confused with the North American foos should not be confused with the North American moose, which is a totally different species. And in season at the do you know that the male moose will chase the female moose, and if the female moose isn't interested, if the female moose is not interested, she turns her back to him and pees. Now, the reason why I know this is because I spend a whole lot of time watching Animal Planet, not Animal Planet, but Planet Earth on BBC over the weekend. But I just thought I'd throw that in since some people might have misheard and when you said foos and thought you said moose. But
The closest thing I ever saw to something like that was two turkeys on my front lawn, one a female, the other a male. The male, of course, among the birds, the male is the one with the magnificent colors and plumage. So here's this male turkey following the
show
female.
off.
The female is not giving the male the time of day, but every few feet the male would stop and unfurl his plumage, trying to show off to the female, but the female would have nothing of it. And I
Right.
found this very interesting. These birds are like walking around, waddling on my front lawn,
Right.
doing this.
The female says, if you want to impress me, go put up some shelves. Yeah.
You
Oh,
want to you want to quickly tell your joke about your praying mantis joke?
oh, right. The praying mantis. What did the female praying mantis say to the male praying mantis? After sex and before I kill you, I could use some help with some
Tell me,
shelves.
tell me.
Anyway, that's one of my favorite jokes because the praying mantis is, watching. If just go YouTube the praying mantis and mating habits and watch what happens to the poor male after he goes through hell to try to pass on his genes to the next generation. He also provides them with plenty of nutrition. Oh
I'm
well.
I'm getting into I'm getting into not praying mantises now, but now that I finally put up my bird feeder. This is not the hummingbird feeder, but some weeks ago I put up a bird feeder, filled it up with seed, and now I'm watching. I've got the binoculars I normally use for stargazing is now right by the sliding glass door, and I'm watching um, with my Audubon book. I've seen a red-bellied woodpecker. I've seen a tufted titmouse.
Hmm.
Yes, that's the name of the bird.
And they're tough.
Um, a house finch. I know
Oh
you were
yeah,
into finches for a long time.
yeah. I raised
A
them.
cardinal and blue jay, and it's remarkable. It's a weird looking bird feeder. It's such that if a squirrel tries to get at the feed or the seed in the feeder, if it's heavy enough to close the doors on the feeders, and I had to adjust the doors yesterday because I found, like, for example, the red-bellied woodpecker, a heavier or larger bird lands on it, and like the doors almost close completely. So I had to adjust it so the doors don't close as freely for relatively heavy
You
birds
better
such as
watch
that.
those squirrels. They'll come back with the toolkit from Home Depot, and
Yeah.
they'll find their way in. Let's run through the rest of the tropics here, and take a look at Tropical Storm Eta, which is going to be a tropical depression too soon. Well defined. I mean, you still see the spinning, and it looks like it really does look like the low level circulation is going to go in the Pacific. But again, look at all the moisture that extends up into the Northwest Caribbean and northeastward from there toward Cuba. So whether the low level center goes out and a new one forms, or this low level center actually winds up turning northwestward and going into the Caribbean sometime Thursday night or early Friday morning, it really doesn't make a difference. You're still going to wind up with the same thing. And here's the latest Hurricane Center forecast. Let's see if the new advisory's in. I just have to refresh this. But as of 7 o'clock Eastern, down to a tropical depression now, 14.1, 86.1, still moving west at 7. And you can see the Hurricane Center makes that sharp right turn to motion toward the north by midnight tomorrow night, into the south, right into the northwest Caribbean, and then turning northeast, strengthens back to a tropical storm by Saturday, approaching western Cuba. By Sunday after midday in the Florida Straits, and then it turns northwestward. Looks like the Hurricane Center wants to take it over the Keys. And notice the very wide cone of uncertainty is rather large. And again, I think you're going to wind up seeing a tropical, this getting to high. I think there's a chance that this could wind up getting to high level tropical storm, or might even strengthen back to a minimal hurricane, depending on what the upper air conditions are when it gets up into the Florida Straits. So we'll see about it. We'll see how that all plays.
Now, do we work hand in hand with the if you're in Cuba, does the National Hurricane Center in Miami work with the Cuban government in terms of warning the populace on Cuba, or does the Cuban government just
I think with the relaxing of once upon a time when a storm went into Cuban airspace, we couldn't the recons couldn't fly into it, and we you wouldn't know what was going on there. You'd see the whole island on the satellite getting flooded out from hurricanes for days, from dying hurricanes and tropical storms for days at a time, and you know that these areas got like 30 inches of rain, and the official Cuban government weather report would be, "Oh, it's this nothing. There's just a shower. It's all nonsense." But yeah, since they relaxed everything, I think now we get Cuban radar. They can see that, and I do believe they coordinate.
yeah, that would be nice. Because I know when a storm would go through, let's say the Bahamas or down in the Leeward or Windward Islands or whatever, the first thing is that the Hurricane Center will immediately get in contact with them. But I often wondered uh, about Cuba. Did they simply just say, "Thanks, we don't need your advice. We've got our own. We've got the weather little weather station out in the backyard here, and we'll take care of it ourselves or whatever." So
Um, By the way, I'm floored here, Joe. You're going to be floored too. I'm going through Super Chat because the chairman has designated this Joe and Joe Appreciation Day, which we really do appreciate you. Actually, we're the ones who appreciate you, our
right.
audience, very much for coming here night after night. We have almost 200 viewers on, and I just want to say
We
thank
had
you
202. We had
to
a max of 202, at
Okay.
least.
Well, I just want to go through and say big thank yous to Johnny Quest, Scott Briller, David
David Schwartz,
Schwartz,
Chuck
Chuck
Cardillo,
Cardillo, Paul Roman, Jason
Roman
Schaefer,
Draper,
Scott
Timothy
Briller,
Belton.
Timothy Veltman for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really, you guys are very generous. You didn't have to do that. And Joe and I thank you very much in a big way. Because,
I wish, I really wish that we were not in this stupid, ridiculous pandemic situation, because I've said it more often than so many times. I wish there was some way that all of us could determine a mutual spot where we could all get together, like at a restaurant or in the summertime at some park or whatever, so that we can all meet each other face to face. And that will happen someday. But right now, of course, due to circumstances beyond anybody's control, that's not going to be happening, at least in the foreseeable future. But we do appreciate all of you getting together and having this nightly get together. And I apologize, Joe, again, but I literally, Renata woke me up like 5 minutes before showtime tonight. I said, where am I? Because I just like laid on the couch and boom, I was out like a light, and didn't even realize it was coming up on Showtime. But it's nice to see all the folks here on the channel tonight. And again, on behalf of Joe and I, we really thank you all for coming to our little what do we call it, Joe? A little coffee clutch
Yeah, pretty much.
in the
Also, want
evening.
to add, by the way, Mark G and Izzy D. Thank you also both everybody. Thank you very much for hitting super chat tonight, and to the chairman for arranging all this because it feels very good. For me anyway. When I started with this idea back about 3 or 4 years ago to just kind of plan on going on my own as far as doing weather on a day to day basis. Uh, it feels good going up to this point to getting as far as as we've gotten, and we're gonna hopefully continue to move along in the coming years.
You know,
And
I you and I both are from,
the
came out of
old
California.
neighborhood. We're
We,
both
yeah,
from
that's
the
right.
old neighborhood.
That's right. We didn't know each other, but we went to the same Catholic school in East Harlem, and
Right.
we didn't really get to know each other until we went many years later to City College, and we met in the City College weather station.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we used to hang out between classes.
Yep. It was pretty
And
cool.
but the thing is that you and I both, spend a lot of time on radio and television, and we know that the TV people are always saying to themselves, we got to think of a way to, reinvent ourselves, a way to think outside of the box, so to speak. Come up with something that the competitors have never come up with or thought about. Well, you know what? You know what I think would really be a big hit would be a couple of guys with about 80 years of weather experience between them to come on the air every night and have like 3 or 4 minutes to do the weather and just not do the weather in the conventional way of standing in front of a map, although we could do that, but just simply like bounce what we do every night here, just bounce ideas and concepts off. And then at the very end, say, and here's what we think is going to happen. We're going to have X number of inches of
Right.
snow. Or whatever. I tell you, Joe, if the two of us were on television or even doing this on the radio, on regular broadcast radio, I
Well,
think
look,
we'd be a
see,
smash.
here's the thing. I just would like to point this out because, and I don't want to sound at all like I'm lecturing you because I'm not. All right. But it really, but it's something that happens as you get older. You just kind of, and I do it too for certain things. You get to a point in your life. Every one of you on the chat board, every one of you that's watching this, as you get older, you get to a point where you just basically refuse to acknowledge any new technology. I would just point out to you, Joe, that what you are suggesting is what we're doing, okay?
Right.
And we're doing it on new media. You want to go and do this on old legacy media, which very soon is probably going to be completely irrelevant. So I'm just pointing that out, that we're doing what we do this every night. You and I, we are
Yeah.
doing it, and we're doing it. It's it's here. It's ours. We don't have we don't have bosses looking over our shoulder telling us what we can and can't do. We have the ultimate freedom.
I understand that, Joe. But on the other hand, wouldn't you like to be able to do what we're doing right now and have some big corporation just throw tons of money at us every night?
Well, look. If as I said, as I've said this to you before, if Dory Sherry is watching tonight and he says, those faces, who are those people? And his assistant turns to him and says, "But sir, they're unknowns, they're nobodies." And he'll say,
Right.
"I don't care. I want you to get me those two. I'm going to make them stars." All right. If that were to
But
happen, and they would want to throw gobs of money at us. When I say gobs of money, I'm talking about figures where you have to kind of look from one side of the page to the other before you get to the decimal point. All right. I'm more than willing to sit down and listen. All right. Until then, I'm okay with this. Okay.
you see, you and I are far from being unknown. I'm sure many people remember you from your days at News 12 and also on Pix 11. I would think that I have a certain number of people who remember me when I was on News 12 Westchester
Yeah, of
or used to
course.
listen to me on radio. So it's not like we're two unknowns. And I think putting us together in one way, shape, or form, we would kill. I
Well,
mean,
look, you're
wouldn't you
speaking.
like to know that during a big snowstorm or an impending nor'easter, that people be walking the streets of New York saying, God, I got to tune in on Joe and Joe and find out what's going to happen tonight.
But
Of
you're
course, they could
you're
do that right
yours.
now on the Joe Chiaffi YouTube channel.
Right.
That you obviously so many of you are doing that right now, but we'd have an even grander audience um,
But you're speaking.
if we were doing that, on
You're
on the
speaking about
local television
you're
airwaves.
speaking about an industry who openly discriminates against people like you and me.
Yes.
Am I right?
The only thing that you and I made a mistake in our profession,
We aged.
the only
That's
thing that
one
you and I
mistake.
did wrong was that we aged.
No,
And unlike
well we
and unlike fine wine which ferments with age,
well I'll tell you
we
what I did wrong.
Yeah.
Well, age, obviously, we age. Everybody ages. Okay, it's a youth-driven business. It's a sex appeal-driven business. No one ever asked me to drop my pants on the air. I don't know that I would have obliged if the price were right. I know I probably wouldn't have. But my point is that there are certain things that you and I can't compete against. Okay, and when you lay down a portfolio of what your experience is and where you've worked and who you've worked for and what you've done, and you realize that the person that's looking at that doesn't give a damn about it, they are just looking at you and kind of sizing you up of how they think you're going to appeal to the whatever audience they're trying to grab. Uh, you have almost no chance. Um, and that is the sad reality. People seem to people have this very skewed view of how television um, television works and the television industry works in general. It's not very nice, and if
No.
you're working, it's not very nice. Now, I will tell you that from my own personal experience, if I had to do it all over again, there are a number of things that I would have done. I would do a lot differently in terms of how I allowed myself to be treated by people, by managers, by high level managers, uh, by even some coworkers with complete disrespect, and you're just sort of told by people that when you complain about it, you're told, well, you know what, just kind of let it go, let it roll off the back, roll off your back, be the bigger person, because you're the one, you're the one we rely on, you're the one that we come to when we really are in a bind, and you never say no when they ask you to work overtime or to give up a holiday or anything else. And guess who wound up outside looking in? Okay, guess who wound up outside looking in?
Yep.
So
You hit it right
I'll
on the
tell
head.
you, well, let's just leave it at that because that starts to get a level of anger up in me, and I don't want to do that. I do want to say this. I never thought I would live to see the day that I would have been able to say this, but I want to thank, without getting political, okay, Joe, I don't want to get political. You folks watching tonight or listening on the podcast, I'm not getting political here, but I just want to thank the pollsters of for this election because I can now say that I am so glad that they can go after somebody else for forecasting things wrong on a daily basis.
Exactly.
Okay,
In fact,
because
somebody took a shot at us, not us, you and me, but at the meteorological profession, saying that the pollsters were
they,
almost as wrong
the
as they as
pollsters make us look good.
well,
So thank you, all
no,
of you
the
pollsters, for
comment was
making us look good.
the posters were almost as bad as the television weather people. I took exception to that, of course, but you know,
Well,
what are you going to say? What are you going to do?
but also this also, I was thinking about this before tonight, before we started tonight, and I was thinking, somebody could weave a pretty interesting conspiracy theory here, where pollsters um, purposely make races sound like they're tight in order to convince the politicians that are running to spend tons and tons of money for commercial time on that television station. I don't know, it just kind of popped into my head that that would be the driver. Pollster hires, hey, oh, listen, you better buy campaign time on on the station because our polls show that you're running neck and neck, and it's just I'm so tired. One thing after whenever we get into these long drawn out election seasons on television, I am so tired of watching these commercials where the person on the other side is the evil one, and it goes on both ways. Don't vote for this other person. He is the devil incarnate walking the
Exactly.
earth. And then the other person comes on and says, "Don't vote for the other person because they're the devil incarnate." It just doesn't stop. Frank Riccio, Jason Barry, Christina Pedia, thank you for hitting super chat tonight. So appreciated. Mark G hit super chat a second time, if I read this correctly, or no, it's a
That's
different
amazing.
one. Well,
Scott Briller, thank you
Mark
so much.
Mark Gladfelter.
Scott, of course, remembers that about this time last year, when FiOS One News went under, so to speak. I don't remember. I thought it was the last night that we were on together, Joe, which would have been November 13th. Maybe it was a few days before, but it was somewhat of an
Well,
emotional moment.
Verizon pulled. We were supposed to. Weren't we supposed to go to like November 13th, and then Verizon wound up pulling the plug
November
like 2 or
15th,
15th. So they pulled it like 2 days before.
right?
Yeah,
And I was
that's
upset because the guy we worked with, Ralph, who always would arrange at on holidays for this huge feasts. Uh,
yes.
he was going to break the bank with a goodbye feast for us, and I guess he had to put in the order early for November 15th, and then all of a sudden, like literally at the last minute, oh, we're not letting you work on the 15th. Where your last day is the 13th. Like what? What?
Yeah.
And we ended up with nothing for uh, for our
Yeah, Ralph
final
was
deal, so
Ralph.
to
Ralph.
speak.
That's what I loved Ralph. He was a great guy. He was always really kind to me, and he spared no expense when it came to uh, treating his coworkers and his staff because he was in charge of all the technical people. Treating them really well. We ate well during the situations when we couldn't get out to
Oh
go
yeah,
get something to eat,
oh yeah.
which was
That
good.
was great. And
He didn't
and
just
I
get
missed that.
yeah.
I missed that yesterday. A few people on Facebook, and I was going back and forth with Charlie Kay and who was retired now, and Peter King. You can hear not the politician, but Peter King of CBS Radio News,
Yeah, I know.
and
Yeah, yeah.
and they were talking about we were talking about the food that the company lays out for you on election night. That was always a big night at News 12 Westchester. Was the amount of, and I loved it because we'd have the 7 o'clock meeting, then we'd have the food that was brought in, and then all the reporters would fan out to cover whatever politician they were going to cover. But that still left a considerable amount of the food in the break room. I'm in the weather center, so every half hour I'm stepping inside and saying, "Now, what do I want this hour? I'll have a little bit of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Oh, wait a minute, I'll have maybe hamburgers or a ziti and whatever." It was great to have all that food just laid out for you. That was the best part of the election night coverage for those of us on the inside was the food, and I kind of missed that because I said to myself, it's another election night, a presidential night, and here I am at home.
Yeah, no, election. I always liked election nights because whenever I worked election nights, which wasn't really very often, but I know you worked always in a situation where they made you stay all night, and I was
Yes,
always in a situation where I got to go home early and get paid for a full day. So,
the yeah, that was, and they kept me there sometimes until 2 in the morning. And the reasoning was, "Oh, Joe, we need you. What do you need me for?" Well, if we were talking to a politician or if we're doing an interview and something drops out, we need somebody to step right in and fill that time. I was known as the accordion. One year I stayed until like 1:30 in the morning, Joe, and then the producer of the wrap-up show that came as we did like an hour show after all of the results were in or whatever. The producer comes to me and says, "Oh, we don't need you." And I went,
oh, I'd go ballistic at that point. You kept me here
I
for
was going
nothing.
ballistic. I was going ballistic, and finally, a young lady, one of the associate producers, a young lady named Andrea White, she came to me and says, "Calm down, calm down. I'll get you 20 seconds." I didn't care. I didn't care. No, I didn't care if I did 20 seconds
It's the
or two
principle
minutes,
of the thing.
but I stayed there because you needed me. And it's 1:30 in the morning, and now you're telling me I can go home.
Yeah. Um,
Anyway,
Scott had just asked me off camera, asked me if I would do something with Siberian snow cover. I don't want to just pull the map up and kind of make it up as a trying to figure out what it's showing as I'm going along. I want to do a little bit of research on it, so I'll do something on it tomorrow. I promise. So tomorrow for you snow lovers, we'll take a look at what's going on the final numbers with Siberian snow cover and what it means and what it doesn't mean. More likely, it means a lot less than we would like it to, but no matter. Indicators work until everybody figures them out and then they stop working. Now that everybody's given up on it, probably it'll start working again. But let's see. And in honor of, you can see what an old cynic I am. So in honor of the election day we just went through, and of course are still going through, the chairman has left a category of presidents tonight for Briller Jeopardy. Which president, Joe, had the most children? And actually, this was in the news recently.
Well, it's too bad that Bobby Kennedy didn't become president, because then we could easily say, he had what, 10 or 11 kids, but he never was
Well, this
president.
is similar, but this was in the news, yes, recently, very recently, about the descendants of this particular president.
The Harrisons?
John Tyler, who
John
had
Tyler.
15 children, but
Wow.
his youngest children were born when he was like 75. So, and his children lived to be 100, near 100, and his grandchildren lived to be 100, and there were two remaining, and one just died at the age of 95, and there's one left now. There's a recent news story back in the last 2 months about this. Question 2: 3 presidents died on the 4th of July.
Oh, didn't was Thomas Jefferson one of them?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I knew this. I remember this question from a long time ago. I remember it was one of them was Jefferson. Was it John Adams?
Yes.
Really? Okay. I haven't a clue about number 3.
Actually, not too far away from the same, born among the same generation, James Monroe.
James Monroe, who had a high school in the Bronx. We still have the high
Yes.
school in the Bronx.
The last president to have facial hair.
Oh, okay. Was it?
Facial hair.
I was gonna say
Joe Chaffee.
the one in the early 20th century. Didn't we have one that was like rather rotund, that had facial hair? I'm trying to think.
Well, I mean, you're in the general time frame, correct? Early part of this century.
It's funny. I just
post Roosevelt, pre Wilson.
Yeah, I'm looking. I was just looking over old newspaper headlines here in this book by the New York Times, and looking at some of the great, former presidents. Like, for example, just to give you an idea, here you go. Look at this. And this book, it's called Page One.
I have that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about Teddy Roosevelt.
Roosevelt, the president between Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson.
Taft?
William Howard Taft, yes. Very good. Now, 12 presidents there were 12 presidents that had facial hair. What else did those 12 presidents have in common? The 12 presidents that had facial hair had something else in common.
Instead of using Gillette blades, they used Wilkinson.
They used Wilkinson. No. They were all Republicans.
Oh, that has something to do with it, I guess, right?
Well, think about it. So you have Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant,
right.
William Howard Taft, and a whole host of others. Well, facial hair was okay. There was a time where facial hair was fine, and hats were all the rage, and then facial hair became something to be completely avoided. Somehow it became synonymous with a deceitful, mistrustful person. Why that should be attached to a politician is beyond me. But and now you notice on television, um, a lot of news people and non and weather people, they're on the air with facial hair, so now it's all okay again.
Yes.
So
And
it's one of
John
those
Kennedy,
things that comes and goes.
the top hat was the end of the era of the top hat was put to the end by John Kennedy, who absolutely refused. I mean, he wore it maybe once, but I mean, on his inauguration, he just refused to wear the top hat. And since that time, we've not seen a single president wear the top hat. So
Yep. Hey, okay, so I think we can wrap it up. So before
we
we,
had a maximum tonight, Joe, unless I'm mistaken. I think I saw the board hit 265 tonight. But thank you for
I think
everyone.
I saw it get close to. I'll see when I get when we go off. I can pull up the max stat, but I could swear I saw like 299. But maybe my eyes
Wow.
are deceiving me. But of course, before we say goodbye, we just want to remind you of the Joe and Joe Weather Show being brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware. We are getting ready. Omni True Value is getting ready. Are you getting ready for winter? And you can go to Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, to get not only rock salt, and they'll never run out because they are Long Island's largest provider of rock salt. But any kind of snow melting stuff that you need, they got. 631 756 1125, 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon. Uh, and I've been there, Joe, and they do have more rock salt than you could possibly imagine. So when they say they're the largest provider of rock salt, they are the largest provider of rock salt.
And if you want mulch, you can get it from them too.
That's
I saw.
correct. So when winter's done, we'll be talking about mulch and all the goodies for the garden. All right, we'll be back tomorrow night. Again, thank you very much, everybody. For those of you who hit super chat tonight, or those of you who didn't and just attended and participated on the chat board, you're all part of the family here. And Joe and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much for being here. Good night, everyone.